Hello, welcome to Creative University episode 13. My name is Lauren Devins, and I'm here with our SEM program manager, Jim Van Horn. Today, we are going to be discussing the changes that have happened in metrics from university analytics to GA4. That migration happened at the beginning of July, and we've been getting some questions about how to translate those metrics between these two separate platforms. So welcome, Jim. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course.
So my first question for you, can you describe some of the most common metrics that have been changed from the universal analytics we've been used to over to GA4?
Sure. So as far as I'll take a look at two different routes. There's one funnel that's a change, as in like the definition of the metrics, even though they're same, like users, for example, that transferred over. It's not like a whole new metric for users, it's still just users. And then also some new metrics. So some of the metrics that changed with calculations. So, if you took a look and compared and contrasted, because there was a little bit of lag time. So for some time in July, they were still running concurrently until Google finally shut down Universal Analytics, or GA3. They're calling it now. GA4 is out. So even though they said it would stop, it was still pulling in data. So some of the questions I know we've even gotten at the agency was some of the more, tech savvy clients that know how to navigate. They're like, well, wait a minute, GA3 is showing, 500 users. And then I'm looking at a report for GA4 and it's showing me 800 users. Like that's a huge discrepancy. And the reason why there are those discrepancies, even when you're looking at some of the metrics that carried over, it's because of how they're calculated. So now, under the old definition for GA3, users meant all users, any users. So it could even be somebody like me or you returning to the site multiple times in a certain period of time. We'd all be tracked in that user accumulation, that total. For GA4, it's unique. So it's the number of unique users. So it tends to trend down if you're comparing and contrasting your old GA3 data versus GA4. You just got to be mindful of what you're looking at, because GA4 defaults to active unique users. But they also have different metrics you can include, such as new users, if you're interested in all the active new users to the website and not just all active users. And then they, of course, still have the traditional total users, which includes everything, new, returning, but still all unique. So it's a little bit more, I guess you could say, honed in and a little bit more precise in GA4, as opposed to where it was a little bit more bloated in GA3. Another metric that kind of changed definition was a session. Before, in the old hit-based with the old analytics, session was basically counted as the same thing as a website visit. So as soon as somebody hit the website, the session started. So if you had, 8,000 sessions, then you technically had 8,000 website hits. Now, a session is technically an engaged session, or how much time a user is engaging on the website. So again, it's going to look lower in GA4, but it's not necessarily saying that, especially if you're looking at, say, June data compared to July data, you might see these drastic drop-offs, but that's just because in June, a session meant a hit on the website, and it started the clock ticking with, what you engaged with and what pages you visited. Now it's more, the terminology is more engaged sessions. So a new user gets to the website, and the first time they scroll or start clicking on elements, then the session starts. And then it starts recording that, regular interval of, what they're engaging with, where they went, and what they might have clicked on. The only other one that really had a big difference or a big change was average session duration. That's kind of been replaced now with average engagement time. Kind of following the same philosophy, though, of average session duration before would have been, you get to the website, even if you leave your tab open, you walk away, you make dinner, you get caught up in a TV show or something, your session's still going until there's no activity for, I think it was 30 minutes, if I remember correctly. Now it it's an engage or average engagement time. So if you go to the tab, it sends out in 10-second intervals back to Google what your activity is. And if there's inactivity after, I think, 30 seconds, it stops that session. So again, you're looking at the old, it might show 2 minutes, but it's not a true 2 minutes of activity. Somebody could just accidentally left it open. Now it's more of a true metric of they were actually engaged on your website for, maybe 56 seconds, which is a whole different story. It looks bad because, your time's cut in half, but it's actually a whole minute that somebody was scrolling through, reading the content that you put on your website, clicked on elements, downloaded resources, submitted form inquiries, watched video content, things of that nature. So those would probably be the big, the three big ones definition wise that changed through the transition. Now that they actually added this back in, by the way, because I know it was missing when it first launched, but bounce rate is back into GA4, but it's still really, I mean, it's no different than what they have now. They did replace it initially with average engagement time, which by definition, bounce rate was no engagement. Engagement time is engagement. So if you're looking for bounce rate, you just took the inverse of whatever your engagement time is. So they did add it back in, I think, for reporting purposes, but it goes along again with that whole methodology that they have now of they're more interested in showing the value of a website and how engaged users are, not how disinterested a user is by leaving the website right away, because that doesn't give you a whole lot of data. At least this way, if a lot of your pages have an average engagement time and then another cluster is well below that percentage, it kind of triggers that thought process of well, why aren't they engaged? Is the copy right? Are we sending them to the right place? What kind of elements are there? Like, should we shift some of the stuff at the bottom of the page up higher to get them to submit an inquiry or download a PDF or use a calculator tool or something of that nature. So those are pretty much the biggest differences between GA3 and GA4 when speaking about just the plain definition and calculation of different metrics.
That's really helpful. And thank you so much for going through all of those. It really sounds like they're really digging into more of how people are engaging with the website as opposed to how they're leaving or how they're not engaging. So kind of a more positive outlook on how people are interacting with your website.
Exactly.
But I know you mentioned a couple that have gone away, but are there other metrics that our viewers might be looking for in GA4 that are no longer there from Google Analytics?
Well, like I said, I alluded to bounce rate. It was gone. It's getting put back in now, but it's still a custom. So it's not default. So if anybody goes into GA4 right now expecting to see bounce rate when they look at one of the acquisition reports, it's not going to be there. It has to be customly built into reporting. So there's actually a lot around the behavior, or what used to be the old behavior tab, which would track like landing page engagement, total website page engagement and performance, things of that nature. That's now considered the engagement tab with GA4, and it's less focused on that. So a lot of times it was really easy to see in GA3 and pull down a list and say, here are my website pages that are working for me, and here are the ones that aren't, because it was all default to show you kind of like where they're coming in from, what pages they're visiting, and here are the primary engagement metrics to measure by. Now everything is a lot more customizable in GA4, which is a good and bad thing. It's good to really get the information that you need, but it's also bad in respect that unless you're with an agency, if you're just a small business trying to do this on your own and you're used to that, everything's just laid out in front of me, everything I need, it's going to be a tough hill to climb, because now to get the same kind of page level data you did before, you need to create, a whole bunch of different custom reports, where you kind of filter down by maybe a specific conversion action, a specific event, maybe a specific source or medium that they're coming from. None of that's pre-built in. So now if you want to see that, you got to build your own template, and then it'll start accumulating data for you.
That's great. And since these changes have kind of been confusing to some users, I was wondering, why would Google make these changes and shift to a whole new platform?
It's pretty much in response to privacy. A few years ago, I don't know if it was, there were a bunch of documentaries coming out and a bunch of different posts, and a lot of the mass public, got upset because they realized that a lot of their personal identifying information or PII information, and not by the masses either, but by a few distinct companies were using it incorrectly. They were scraping user data online without permission. Not like, here's my information, I'm giving it to you because I want you to contact me. They were employing, behind the scenes bots and crawlers to scrape, your, mine, everybody's data, and then they're selling that off to marketing platforms, agencies, data providers, so they could make money, and then in turn would turn around and sell that data to other parties. So by the end of it, your personal information is out to everybody in the world. Like, everybody knows about you. It could be, very detailed. So in response to that, one of the first catalysts was, I'm sure you remember iOS did this update first, where they removed cookies. Cookie tracking was the main basis for that. And that's even how they scraped a lot of it, was tracking that cookie data that was stored in all of our browsers. When cookies were at the highest peak, cookies could store all of your information as long as you still use the same logins, you use the same laptop, you have the same phone. If you're using the same browsers, all your information was out there. So what they did to combat that was, for the past couple of years now, we've been getting away from cookies. And it's all been in a process to create more anonymity, more privacy for the end user. So their information isn't out there, and it doesn't impact us much. We just see basically a silhouette, where before it might have been a portrait where you could pick out eye color and hair color. Now it's just a silhouette of a person where you kind of know their likes and dislikes to show them products or services they may or may not be interested in. So what GA4 did was to help combat the disappearance of cookies that gives us a lot of the data that businesses want to know. How did people get to my website? What did they view? Where did they go before this? How many paid? All of that was tracked through the cookie. So with that going away, what Google had to do was figure out, if this disappears tomorrow, how do we still give businesses and agencies clean, accurate data so they can make sound business decisions, and create marketing strategies to make sure that products and services get in the right hands. So what Google did was they kind of took away the user browser approach, the cookie, and they switched to a server-side event-based data attribution model. So instead of relying on the cookie in the user browser, GA4 pulls from the server, and it's still 100% anonymous. But what it does is, instead of intruding on your or my personal, viewing habits online, it's actually pulling from the server of the website. So whenever somebody goes to a website, the server is collecting some, basic information. It's not collecting like your height, your age, or, your preferences. It's just collecting like, maybe where you're located, like a geolocation, and maybe what tech you're using. You're visiting from a mobile phone versus a desktop. So nothing too intrusive. And then what it's doing is it's backpedaling and using data modeling to create a clearer picture of, okay, so this person from Philadelphia visited our website on their mobile phone. And since our website is about X, Y, and Z, we can deduce that their interests align with X, Y, and Z. So it doesn't rely on cookies. So everything could get stripped through any platform, and you could still get a cleaner picture through GA4 pulling in the data to tell you who's visiting your business, more so than you could with GA3, and still adhering to all the various, privacy that's out there now between GDPR, there's CCPA in California. I mean, almost every state at the state level has their own regulations around it, not to mention internationally and nationally. So it kind of cuts out a lot of those murky waters of violating a user's privacy while still delivering them a good experience online, because for how much, we all might have complained and finding out that how much of our sensitive information was available to pretty much anybody for sale. it would still be a very poor experience. Like if you or I went online, and what if we just saw nothing? What if there was no marketing? Well, if I didn't know about, big on shoes or I'm big on clothes, and I don't know that there's this limited edition shoe coming out because nobody can tell that I like shoes. So what GA4 helps do is limit the availability of information online from the users while also delivering enough data so users can get the type of marketing that they actually want to engage with, and while increasing and keeping the business's revenue stream going, without collecting too much or scraping too much or entering into like illicit practices that might have happened a few years ago.
No, that's really helpful. So it sounds like it's kind of mutually beneficial for the users in terms of protecting their privacy, and for agencies to be able to see still how people are interacting with their website, their ads, and things like that.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. In short, it kind of took the person out of it. Now it's
yeah.
just communicating with the website and the server. So the user browser isn't even a question anymore. It's just pulling in data from the website and the server itself. So it's more of like a tech stack now than your information being out there to everybody.
It's that silhouette analogy. I liked that one.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim, so much for outlining these changes. I know that'll be really helpful as people try to work through comparing these new metrics with the ones that they're used to. And thank you, viewer, for joining us today. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for future tips in the world of marketing, web design, and development to help you grow your business. We will see you next time.